Imagine a secret sanctuary hidden deep beneath the mountains, where a scarred white dragon has spent over 500 days in silence, feared by all and destined for a final sentence. Until one woman risks everything to step inside his cage. What unfolds is a fight against fear, against time, and against the board that wants him gone forever. If you're new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video. And tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Now, let's jump into the story. The hidden sanctuary lay deep beneath the rocky valleys of Wyoming. Few knew it existed. On the surface, the land looked ordinary. Wind-swept plains stretching towards snow-capped peaks. But miles below, reinforced tunnels and chambers formed what was known only to insiders as the Haven, a secret facility built to shelter creatures the world refused to believe were real. Dr. Lena Hartwell adjusted the straps of her protective gear as she descended the lift to the lower levels. She had once been a respected zoologist, known for her gentle way with animals others called impossible. Now, in her retirement, she volunteered at the Haven. She told herself it was to stay useful, but deep inside, she knew the truth. It was because of him, Orin. The dragon had been in confinement for nearly 500 days. His scales shimmered like snow under morning sun, catching every artificial light the keeper shone into his enclosure. But there was no fire in him, no pride. His body bore scars, jagged reminders of battles long past, and his eyes, icy blue and sharp, watched every movement with suspicion. Orin was deaf. His silence was not peaceful, but heavy, leaving him trapped in a world of fear and restless vigilance. Jonas Green, the senior handler, waited at the corridor. His frame was solid, but his face carried the lines of decades spent around creatures larger and wilder than himself. "Morning, Doc," he said, his voice gravelly. "Back again to see our white ghost?" Lena offered only a nod. Her eyes were already fixed on the reinforced window at the end of the hall. Behind the transparent wall, Orin lay curled in the far corner of his cell, his body tense even in rest. "No applications?" Lena asked quietly, though she already knew what Jonas would say. He shook his head, pulling up a holographic display from the small device on his wrist. "Not one. The deafness frightens them. The panic episodes frighten them more. Yesterday, he nearly destroyed the feeding hatch when an attendant came too close. The poor boy's still shaking." Lena pressed her hand against the cold glass. On the other side, Orin shifted his head, nostrils flaring. His eyes locked on hers, searching, wary. "He's not dangerous," Lena whispered. Though her words were muffled by the barrier, "He's terrified." Jonas lowered his voice. "You know what the board is discussing tomorrow? Permanent containment protocols. Their way of saying the end." Lena's stomach tightened. She had seen this outcome before. When no handler wanted the risk, when no sanctuary could accept the cost, the facility's solution was final sleep. Painless, permanent, and irreversible. Orin's chest rose and fell in quick, shallow breaths as he shifted uneasily. His world was one of constant shadows, of vibrations he could not understand. Fear had become his only companion. Lena stepped back from the window, her heart pounding. "I'm going in." Jonas stared at her, disbelief crossing his weathered face. "Lena, you know the rules. No direct entry without a full team." "Then get me a team. They're all tied up with the displaced colony from Colorado. You can't just walk in there." "Then I'll sign a waiver. Personal responsibility. If anything happens, it's on me." Jonas muttered. "You." But he knew her mind was made up. Within minutes, he was pulling digital forms onto his screen, his hands moving reluctantly. "If he scratches you even once." "He won't," Lena said firmly. 20 minutes later, After signing more waivers than she could count, Lena stood before the massive door to Oren's cell. The steel groaned as it opened just enough for her to slip through. She entered slowly, her steps measured, her body angled in a way that spoke of no threat. Oren's head shot up instantly, his nostrils flaring, his muscles tensed, ready to spring if needed. Lena made no sound. She knew words would mean nothing. Instead, she walked a few paces inside, then lowered herself to the ground. She pulled a small tablet from her bag and began reading, her eyes focused on the glowing screen instead of the creature across the room. The silence stretched. Oren stayed pressed against the far wall, his gaze locked on her every move. Minutes turned to an hour. Her breathing stayed steady, her posture calm. She gave them no reason to fear. Time crawled. In the second hour, he lowered himself onto his belly, though his eyes never left her. In the third, fatigue overtook her, and the tablet slipped from her hands, clattering softly against the floor. Her eyes shot open at the sudden warmth brushing her cheek. Oren was close, impossibly close. His massive head hovered just above her, his breath hot and heavy, carrying the scent of ash and metal. Lena's pulse raced, but she forced her hand upward, slow and deliberate. Oren flinched, every muscle tight, yet he did not move away. Her fingers brushed the smooth scales of his snout. The contact lasted only a second, but it was enough. For the first time in nearly 500 days, Oren did not retreat. Lena whispered, "You're safe," knowing he could not hear, but needing to say it anyway. Outside the glass, Jonas watched with wide eyes. He had seen dragons rage, dragons fight, dragons destroy. But he had never seen one tremble and lean into the touch of a human hand. And so the hidden sanctuary, a place built to contain, became something else that night. It became the beginning of trust. The next morning, Lena returned to Oren's cell with a quiet determination. Sleep had been fleeting, her mind replaying the moment when her hand touched his scales. It was not victory, but it was a beginning. Jonas met her at the corridor, shaking his head as though he already knew what she planned. "You're pushing boundaries," he warned. "The board will shut this down if they think you're wasting resources." Lena adjusted her gloves. "I'm not wasting anything. I'm giving him a chance." The door opened once more with its heavy groan. Oren lifted his head, nostrils twitching as her scent reached him. This time, he did not retreat to the corner. Instead, he remained where he was, coiled but alert. Lena settled herself on the ground again, cross-legged, a safe distance away. She carried no restraints, no food, no tools of control. Instead, she lifted her hand slowly and laid her palm flat, a gesture of calm. Oren's eyes narrowed, the deep blue reflecting the overhead light. She made no sound, but repeated the motion. Hand flat, calm. She lowered her hand and resumed her stillness. Oren's gaze flicked to the gesture, then back to her face. Day after day she returned. Sometimes she brought her tablet and pretended to read, giving him space to grow accustomed to her presence. Other times she simply sat, breathing steadily, creating a rhythm he could sense even without hearing. The dragon began to shift. His breathing matched hers. His muscles, once taut with fear, eased for moments at a time. It was fragile progress, but progress nonetheless. On the 7th day, Lena brought something new, a slim board fitted with colored lights. Jonas followed reluctantly, carrying the device and muttering that the board would call her plan foolish. Inside the cell, Lena placed the light board near her. She pressed the blue light, then pointed toward the water trough. Oren's head tilted slightly, curiosity flickering in his eyes. She repeated the action 3 times, always slow, always deliberate. Then she waited. Minutes passed, heavy with silence. Oren shifted his claws, his tail scraping faintly against the floor. Finally, he moved, lowering his head to the trough and drinking. Lena exhaled a shaky breath. "Yes," she whispered. Jonas, watching from beyond the glass, rubbed his forehead. "I'll be damned." Over the next days, she added green for food, red for danger, and yellow for rest. Oren's intelligence revealed itself quickly. Within a week, he was responding to the signals, his actions aligning with the lights she chose. But every success only sharpened the urgency. The board's patience was thin. Jonas reminded her daily. "They see numbers, Lena," he told her in the break room. "Each day he stays here costs more than housing 3 ordinary dragons. They don't care about signals or lights. They want results that fit on a report." She sipped the facility's strong coffee, her hands trembling, though she tried to hide it. "He's not a number. He's a living being. He just needs time." Jonas sighed, leaning back against the wall. "You've grown attached. That's dangerous." "Maybe," Lena admitted softly. "But someone has to believe in him." Her sessions with Oren deepened. She discovered that sudden shadows passing over his enclosure unsettled him, and vibrations from heavy machinery left him panicked. By avoiding these triggers, she created safe conditions for their work. One afternoon, while demonstrating the red light for danger, a maintenance crew dropped equipment in a nearby corridor. The sound was muffled through walls, but the vibration rattled the floor. Oren's body snapped taut, wings folded, claws scraping against metal. Lena reacted instantly. She raised both hands high, a gesture she had practiced for moments like this. Oren froze, his chest heaving. Slowly, his posture lowered. The panic ebbed. It was proof. He could learn to trust signals instead of instinct. Lena smiled through her exhaustion. "You're stronger than they think," she whispered. Still, the whispers of the board grew louder. Termination was scheduled for discussion again. Jonas delivered the news one evening as Lena filed her reports. "They're saying progress doesn't matter if no one will adopt him," he said heavily. "They want closure. They want resources freed." Lena stared at the glowing lines on her report, her throat tight. "Then I'll find another way." That night, she sat alone in her small apartment, staring out at the vast Wyoming mountains. Beyond the horizon, wild dragons sometimes circled in the dusk. Oren had once been part of that world, and now he was trapped beneath caged and waiting for a decision he did not understand. Lena clenched her hands. "Not yet," she murmured. "He deserves more than this." The next morning, she carried the lightboard into Oren's cell again. He was waiting this time, eyes fixed on her as though anticipating the signals. She pressed yellow for rest, then lowered herself onto the ground. Oren followed, lowering his body until he lay opposite her. The air between them filled with quiet understanding. Jonas watched silently from the corridor. For the first time in years, he felt a stir of something he had almost forgotten. Hope. As the days passed, Oren's responses became swifter, his trust stronger. He even began to mimic her gestures, creating small signals of his own. Lena kept detailed notes, evidence that could not be ignored. Yet the pressure mounted. A final review meeting loomed on the calendar. The board would demand answers, not feelings. Lena knew the truth. She had broken the silence between Oren was not just surviving. He was learning, adapting, reaching across the gulf of fear. But unless she found the courage to stand before the board and fight for him, all their progress would be swept away. The silence was breaking, but the storm had only begun. The day of the board meeting arrived colder than usual, a gray sky pressing down on the valley above the haven. Underground in the stark conference chamber, the air felt even heavier. Polished metal walls reflected the pale glow of overhead lights, and the long table gleamed like ice. 5 board members sat in their places, each holding tablets stacked with financial reports, safety records, and incident logs. They were ready to decide Oren's fate. Dr. Lena Hartwell entered quietly, escorted by Jonas Green. Though only volunteers and staff were typically allowed, she had requested to speak on Oren's behalf. Jonas had pulled what strings he could, convincing the board to grant her 5 minutes. Chairwoman Evelyn Strauss, a woman whose expression rarely shifted from controlled neutrality, began the session. Specimen 917 has been confined for over 500 days, she said, her voice calm but sharp. He is unadoptable, unmanageable, and financially unsustainable. The motion before us is to initiate permanent containment protocols. The words hung heavy. Permanent containment. Everyone in the room knew it meant euthanasia by gas. Before the vote could begin, Lena rose, her palms pressed against the table, steady though her pulse raced. With respect, Oren is not unmanageable, she said firmly. He is deaf, yes, and traumatized, but he is intelligent. He has learned a system of signals that allow us to communicate. He drinks when shown the blue light. He eats when shown the green. He recognizes danger with red. He understands rest with yellow. He is learning every day. Dr. Kellen Morris, one of the senior board members, leaned back in his chair with a frown. Learning signals does not erase risk. His panic attacks alone make him a danger to staff. How many more near incidents must we endure before we accept reality? Jonas stepped forward, his voice unusually quiet. She's telling the truth. I've seen the progress myself. He's calmer now, more aware, more responsive. He's not the same dragon who arrived here. Strauss tapped her tablet, scrolling through incident reports. Yet there are still no applications for adoption. No sanctuary willing to house him. No handler requesting transfer. We cannot spend endless resources on a single dragon when others are waiting. Lena took a slow breath. This was the moment she had prepared for. Then let me adopt him. The words froze the room. Even Jonas turned to her, eyes wide. Excuse me? Strauss asked, her voice as cold as the table between them. I will take responsibility, Lena said. I have already begun modifications on my property. Reinforced enclosures. Climate control. Safety barriers. I have the financial resources to provide for his care for the rest of his life. I will assume full legal liability. The haven will bear no risk once he is transferred to me. Morris scoffed. You are a retired zoologist, not a dragon keeper. Do you understand what you are offering? These creatures require more than compassion. They require control. Lena held her ground. I understand them more than your spreadsheets ever will. I spent years working with animals everyone said were impossible. And I've spent more time with Oren than anyone else in this facility. I know his signals, his triggers, and his strengths. I am not asking for your trust. I am offering proof. She slid her tablet across the table, the display filled with detailed diagrams of her property. The enclosure she had commissioned was drawn in precise measurements. Reinforced fencing, specialized feeding systems, medical equipment, emergency protocols. Financial documents confirmed she had secured long-term funding for his care. The board members studied the information, expressions shifting from skepticism to reluctant interest. Strauss looked up finally. You would truly dedicate your home, your life to one dragon? Yes, Weena replied without hesitation, because he is not just one dragon. He is a life that deserves a chance. What message do we send if we destroy a creature simply because he is difficult or different? People will learn from him. He will prove that compassion and patience can achieve what fear never could. Murmurs moved around the table. Some members frowned at the cost analysis, others at the precedent it might set. But the weight of her words lingered. Jonas broke the silence. We all know the truth. If Dr. Hartwell hadn't intervened, Oren would already be gone. She's shown us he can adapt. If anyone deserves the chance to continue that work, it's her. Morris drummed his fingers against the. And if he injures her, if she fails, the backlash will fall on us. The liability will be mine, Lena answered quickly. The contract stated clearly, the Haven will not be held responsible. You lose nothing by giving him this chance. But you will gain something invaluable, the proof that progress is possible. For a long moment, only the hum of ventilation filled the chamber. Then Strauss leaned back, eyes narrowing as she considered. Very well. The board will table the motion for termination. We will allow a trial adoption, contingent upon inspection of your facilities. There will be monthly reviews during the first year. Any sign of failure, and we will end the arrangement. Relief threatened to overwhelm Lena, but she held steady. That is all I ask. The motion passed, though Morris's glare made it clear he would be waiting for her to stumble. Strauss, however, seemed almost curious. As the meeting ended, Jonas caught her arm in the corridor. You've lost your mom, he muttered, though there was a small smile tugging at his lips. But maybe that's exactly what Oren needed. Lena allowed herself a rare moment of quiet triumph. She knew the hard part had only just begun. Building a sanctuary was one thing. Earning Oren's trust outside the walls of the Haven would be another. But she also knew this. The silence between them had broken, and in that fragile connection lay a future neither of them had dared to imagine. The day Oren left the Haven was cloaked in steady rain. Clouds hung low over the Wyoming peaks, and the air smelled of wet stone and pine. For Lena Hartwell, it felt like the world itself was holding its breath. The transport carrier rumbled along the mountain road, flanked by 2 facility vehicles. Inside the reinforced chamber, Oren shifted restlessly, his wings brushing against the metal walls. He had spent more than 500 days in confinement. Every vibration of the journey unsettled him. Yet his eyes never strayed far from Lena, who rode close by. She kept her hands visible, offering the gestures they had created together. Calm, safe, home. After 3 long hours, they reached Lena's property at the edge of the foothills. Once an ordinary farmhouse, it had been transformed into a sanctuary built for one extraordinary creature. High fences, reinforced shelters, a natural pool fed by spring water, and wide space for wings to stretch, all designed with Oren's safety and comfort in mind. When the transport door opened, the dragon hesitated. Rain slicked his pearly scales, and his chest rose with fast, uncertain breaths. He had known only walls, cold floors, and the artificial light of captivity. Now, the open sky stretched above him, endless and free. Lena stepped forward, raising her hand in the signal for trust. Oren's gaze locked onto her, and for a long moment, the world seemed still. Then he moved, first a slow step, then another, until at last his claws sank into the soft earth of his new home. Jonas, standing nearby with arms crossed, whispered, "Look at him. He's never seen this much space." Oren's body trembled, but it was not fear, it was release. After a moment's pause, he broke into a run. The ground shook under his weight as he sprinted across the enclosure, spreading his wings wide. They caught the wind, lifting him just enough for a glide, before he landed with a heavy but graceful thud. A sound rumbled from deep in his chest, not a roar, but something older, raw, and powerful. Lena wiped at her eyes, though rain disguised the tears. "Welcome home," she whispered. The days that followed were filled with adjustment. Oren explored every corner of the sanctuary. He tested the pool, splashing clumsily at first, then with growing joy. He rubbed against the trees planted for him, leaving marks as though claiming them as his own. Each night, he returned to the reinforced shelter. Curling close to where he could see Lena's porch light glowing in the dark. Lena documented his progress with care. Not for the board, though monthly reports were still required, but for herself. She noted how quickly he adapted to routines, how he signaled hunger with a tilt of his head, how he brushed stones into deliberate patterns along the ground, as if creating his own language. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the peaks, Oren arranged the stones into a rough circle. Lena stepped closer, recognizing the shape he had seen her draw on the lightboard months before. The signal for safe. Her voice broke as she whispered, "You're telling me you feel safe?" Oren lowered his head to her, and she pressed her palm against his scales. Months passed, and their bond deepened. Oren became playful, chasing the light of a lantern across the ground like a hatchling. He grew calmer during storms, comforted by Lena's steady presence. More than once, Jonas visited and shook his head in disbelief. "I thought you were reckless," he told her, "but I've never seen a creature change like this." Lena smiled. He didn't change. He just finally got the chance to be himself. The seasons turned. Winter brought snow, and Oren reveled in it, rolling his massive body to create imprints that looked like dragon-shaped angels. Spring returned with wildflowers blooming across the valley, and Oren took to patrolling his territory, moving with a confidence that once seemed impossible. Then came the day that sealed his transformation. Lena found him near the pool, arranging stones with unusual focus. When he finished, she stepped closer and froze. The stones formed not a signal she had taught, but a word. Crude, imperfect, but unmistakable. Thank. Her breath caught. "You're thanking me?" she whispered. Tears blurred her vision, but her smile held steady. "No, Oren. Thanked you." Word of his progress spread quietly through the conservation community. Some wanted to study him, others to film documentaries. Lena declined most offers. Oren had been a specimen long enough. Here in the mountains, he was simply himself, no longer a case file, no longer an experiment, but a living being with dignity. The board eventually closed his file, listing the adoption as a success. But for Lena, success was never about paperwork. It was about the nights she spent on her porch. Oren settled nearby, the two of them sharing silence that spoke louder than any sound. Years passed, and Oren thrived. He learned to communicate more signals, adding his own variations. He showed affection in ways subtle and powerful, lowering his head for her touch, or resting near the house during storms. Their bond became a rhythm as steady as the mountains themselves. And then one day, a call came. Another dragon had been found, smaller, scarred, and deaf like Oren once was. The sanctuary feared she would not survive. Lena drove to see her, her heart aching at the sight of the frightened young creature. Back home, Oren waited at the enclosure. When the new arrival, copper-scaled and trembling, was brought near, Oren stepped forward. He lowered himself, breathing steadily, showing her the calm gestures Lena had once shown him. In that moment, the circle completed. Lena watched through quiet tears. Oren, once the broken and forgotten, had become a guide. He was no longer just surviving. He was leading another toward hope. As twilight painted the sky in shades of gold, Lena whispered, "This is why we never give up, because even silence can become a language of love." The mountains stood tall around them, timeless and unyielding, and within their shadow, a woman, a dragon, and a fragile new life built a family against all odds.